Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kirk Cousins, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 8 quarterback and tight end rankings for the 2021 fantasy football season. Like I mentioned on today's episode, we're going to be both covering the quarterback and tight end position, beginning with matchups. We'll talk about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks and tight ends thus far this season on average, to give us some perspective as to who has the most advantageous matchups going into the week and how that could potentially help the upside of these given players. Of course, we'll talk about my top 16 quarterback and tight end rankings, as I'll share my perspective and opinion and the statistics to justify the reasoning as to why I think the quarterback and tight end positions will be stacking up the way I kind of perceive them to by the end of Week 8. Now, before we begin today's video, I want to thank you guys for the incredible support, of course, recently helping us surpass 55,000 subscribers, but we're not stopping anytime soon. We are on our goal and on our path to 60K. If you guys have not yet already and you're new to the channel and you're trying to win a 2021 Fantasy Football Championship, make sure to subscribe down below. Of course, we're making content every single day on the channel in order to help you. Later this afternoon, after the Thursday night football game between the Arizona Cardinals and Green Bay Packers, I will be live streaming here on the channel answering your guys' questions for Week 8. For those of you interested, come check that out. Also, if you guys haven't yet already, check out Underdog Fantasy. I'm going to be drafting a team a little bit later today because, you know, it's so easy to play fantasy football with Underdog. I mean, whether it is a Thursday night contest, the various pick'ems, regardless of what sport it is, the NFL, the NBA, there are so many ways to play fantasy football and have fun on a weekly basis. If you go ahead and use promo code Andrew right now, Underdog Fantasy is willing to match your first deposit of up to $100. It's an extremely generous offer, and I think you guys should take advantage of it now. Of course, I will be drafting between the quarterback and tight end section. I will be doing a draft for the Thursday night contest, and of course, putting together a pick'ems lineup for this upcoming night's game to see if I can get myself a couple prizes here. Nonetheless, check them out. Use promo code Andrew. All that information is down in the description for those of you who are interested. Also, timestamps are down in the description for those of you looking for a specific player. I know the quarterback and tight end position, they don't really require many adjustments. Many of you just have one stable tight end or one stable quarterback, but if you are dealing with a scenario in which you need to stream a player, we'll of course have extended lists to the top 16 to hopefully give you guys some extra information that'll give you more of an educated decision going into your Week 8 contest. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and let's get right into it, shall we? Let's talk about our Week 8 quarterbacks, beginning with matchups. As you can see on screen to the very left side, we're talking about 2021 quarterback fantasy points allowed. How many points defenses have given up to opposing quarterbacks thus far this season on average in a 4-point per passing touchdown format. Of course, thus far this season, the Washington football team, Kansas City Chiefs, Atlanta Falcons, Cleveland Browns, and Dallas Cowboys are giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks. And, you know, we're in Week 7. These lists are beginning to solidify themselves, and as we have progressed throughout the weeks, we're getting to a position where, yes, these are the worst defenses in the National Football League, and maybe it's because they've had very difficult competition, or maybe it's just because their defenses truly cannot stop opposing quarterbacks. Regardless of whether it's a quarterback like Tom Brady that never leaves a pocket, or someone like Jalen Hurts who is scrambling for fourth quarter yards with his legs, these defenses just can't stop opposing quarterbacks. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have the Buffalo Bills, Arizona Cardinals, Denver Broncos, New Orleans Saints, Los Angeles Chargers that have been great. I mean, this doesn't really bode well for quarterbacks like Mac Jones or perhaps Tom Brady, who's playing against New Orleans, who in the last, 3 games that he's played against them hasn't had incredible games, but at the end of the day was able to get the job done and get us enough fantasy points to lead us to victory. The Denver Broncos will be taking on Taylor Heineke. Doesn't bode well for him. Aaron Rodgers has to take on the Arizona Cardinals without his 3 top wide receivers, in my opinion, with Adams, Allen Lazard, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling out. The Buffalo Bills, they take on Tua. Tua has been incredible in the last 2 games. I think it's 6 total touchdowns that he's scored through the air. It's going to be a tough matchup for him in a game in which they might end up getting blown out because it truly is difficult for them to keep up with the firepower that the Buffalo Bills have on roster. But we never know. Either way, just wanted to go ahead and present to you guys these statistics in order to kind of give you guys some more overall understanding as to how the matchups give some players an advantage while others may be suffering this week based on the defenses that are up against them. Nonetheless, we'll refer back to these statistics and we'll come back and talk about tight ends after we cover the quarterback position. All right, let's go ahead. Again, rankings are subject to change. There's a lot of variables changing. There's a lot of players going in and out with injuries. If, in fact, the rankings change throughout the week, I will go ahead and update that on my Patreon for those of you looking to support there. I will also be live streaming every Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I will have these updated rankings, top 16 quarterbacks, along with the other rankings, top 36 wide receivers, running backs, and top 16 tight ends available there. Thank you very much. All right, let's get into this, shall we? Let's talk about the quarterback position, beginning with our number one. It is Josh Allen, coming off the bye week, playing against the matchup in which he always succeeds. I mean, the last time they took on the Miami Dolphins this year, it was a 35-0 blowout. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to put up many points, only 16.66 in a 4-point per passing touchdown format, but that kind of gives you a little bit of a perspective as to exactly what Josh Allen has in store for him this week. The last time they played against Miami, Tua went down with an injury, but I mean, Josh Allen versus the Miami Dolphins has always been a successful thing for him. Going even back to his rookie season, he has always been able to find a lot of success against this defense. And based on the way that the Miami Dolphins have played as of late, of course, in 5 of their 7 games thus far this season, they've given up 2+ touchdowns to 5 quarterbacks. I mean, to be honest, it's such an incredible matchup for him. They're giving up the 8th most points to opposing quarterbacks. He's coming off of a game in which he put up 28.72 fantasy points after the first 2 weeks of the season. From then on, from weeks 3 to 7, I mean, he has just been one of the top quarterbacks. In fact, thus far this season, he's averaged the most fantasy points per game amongst all quarterbacks in a 4-point per passing touchdown league. He's an automatic play in a fantastic matchup. That's Josh Allen for us. Moving on to Patrick Mahomes as our number 2. Here's the thing about Patrick Mahomes. Yes, he has been struggling, but there are a lot of things that go into it, and I'm going to talk about it because I literally, before recording this video, I watched that game over again. And I already watched it earlier this week, but I wanted to watch it again just to kind of give you some perspective. Every defense that they're probably going to play for the rest of the season is going to sit in some sort of cover 2, cover 3. And they're not going to allow Patrick Mahomes to take the top off the defense. They're not going to, because that's exactly what Patrick Mahomes wants to do, especially with Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman on that team. They want Patrick Mahomes to dump it off 10 yards here, 7 yards here, 4 yards here, and just live with that. And Patrick Mahomes, they know, is very impatient, and he's going to make a mistake, and he's going to have, himself plays in which, of course, he'll make those mistakes trying to beat the defense regardless of the fact that, that player is not open. But with that all said, it is pretty much an entire offense as a whole that has been struggling. It's not just Patrick Mahomes. The offensive line against 4 rushers were just giving up too much pressure last week. And with that said, yes, there are at times positions in which Patrick Mahomes should step up into the pocket instead of scrambling out. So be it. The interceptions that he's throwing, a lot of them are off of tip passes. I mean, he's literally throwing it onto a receiver and it's getting deflected or ricocheting off their pads and going into another defender's hand. So be it. It is what it is. I look at what this guy's been able to do in the last couple weeks, specifically against the Tennessee Titans and, of course, in weeks prior. But the thing that was glaring against the Tennessee Titans was the fact that their time of possession was, they got killed in terms of time of possession. It was the worst that they've ever faced all season long. Derrick Henry kept that ball for so much time. The time of possession was 23-39 in comparison to 36-21. The only other time this season that they've been blown out in terms of time of possession at that capacity, in fact, the only other time this season that they've been blown out and actually lost the differential and haven't led in terms of time of possession was against the Baltimore Ravens. And it was a little bit less brutal in terms of total time of possession. It was 24-01 to 35-59, but it was still in that region. If you want to beat Patrick Mahomes, you sit in a cover 2, sit in a cover 3, you drop a bunch of safeties and linebackers and corners, and you play coverage, and you force him to beat you with your legs. And if you go ahead and you maintain an early lead and you can force the Kansas City Chiefs to not run the ball, then you're in a fantastic position. Now, with that all mentioned, is that something that the New York Giants are capable of doing? Probably not. I just want to put it in perspective, give you guys a little bit of understanding as to, yes, it's not just him. There's offensive penalties, withholding, and stupid mistakes that they're consistently making when they're going down on drives to score. They're missing field goals. They're making mistakes. They're dropping passes, and a lot of it, yes, it starts with Mahomes, and he will get majority of the blame, but it's not all on him. The offense will step up. I think they'll be fine. I know that took a little while to explain all that, but hopefully it gives you some context as to what is going on in that offense and why Patrick Mahomes hasn't been the same in the last couple games. Moving on to Kyler Murray in the Thursday night matchup against the Green Bay Packers. What are we talking about here? We're talking about Kyler Murray, who, as of late has been pretty much on fire. Had himself a great game, 3 touchdowns against the Houston Texans. Obviously hasn't been able to get his legs going much, but he doesn't really need to. He takes on the Green Bay Packers tonight. And the Green Bay Packers offense, I'm not really worried about that. I'm thinking about Kyler versus this defense, because that is really the entire factor of this. And for right now, I'm thinking to myself, well, every single game that the Green Bay Packers have played this season, they've at least given up one passing touchdown to every opposing quarterback. Whether it was Winston in week 1 with 5 touchdowns. Goff in week 2 had 2 touchdowns. Jimmy G had 2 touchdowns. Burrow had 2 touchdowns. Big Ben had a touchdown. Justin Fields, of all quarterbacks, was able to find a successful week against this defense. Just this last week, he got, what do you have, 5 turnovers against Tampa Bay? Nonetheless, I think Kyler Murray is far too talented, along with, of course, his coaching staff and the players that surround him. It is just far too advantageous of a matchup, especially against the secondary that is truly going to struggle without the help of Jair Alexander back there covering, DeAndre Hopkins or an AJ Green. Kyler Murray, even without his legs, is still a top premier quarterback, and that's why he's as our number 3 this week. We move on to Jalen Hurts. Now, Jalen Hurts taking on the Detroit Lions, the 11th easiest matchup of the quarterback position, is pretty much as good as it could possibly get. In the last 2 weeks, quarterbacks versus Detroit, Joe Burrow and Matthew Stafford both threw for 3 passing touchdowns, found a lot of success against that defense. But what could we potentially anticipate from Jalen Hurts? Jalen Hurts is coming off of a week in which he had 236 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 61 rushing yards for 23.54 fantasy points. And he has yet to put up a performance of less than 20 fantasy points this season, making him a completely perfect option and a consistent one at that. Now, the distribution of fantasy points that he has scored per quarter this year is quite jarring, and I wanted to go ahead and mention that really quickly. In the first quarter this season, he's put up 33.8 fantasy points. In the second, 26.3. In the third, 38.6. And in the final quarter of play, in the fourth quarter, he has put up 75.9 fantasy points. There's just a number alone. He's put up more points in the fourth quarter than he has in the first and third combined. Just putting that in perspective, yes, I know this team isn't great and their defense is not playing well, but that should just kind of give you a little bit of an understanding as to how much garbage time he's benefiting from. Not only that, how much he's benefiting from rushing the ball. Thus far this season in terms of rushing points, so rushing stats alone, just yards and touchdowns, he has more rushing stats in terms of fantasy point total than Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, Najee Harris, Darrell Henderson, Leonard Fournette, and Austin Eckler. That is an unbelievable statistic, but nonetheless, takes on a very advantageous matchup in Detroit. And I think, of course, when we're talking about a garbage time quarterback in a game in which maybe Detroit could end up finding their first victory, should be a very high scoring one maybe between these two teams, as their defenses won't be able to stop much. We move on to the next quarterback on hand. We have Matthew Stafford coming off of a game in which he showed a little bit of an extra juice, I feel like. I feel like he had a little bit of extra in him to give against the Detroit Lions because it was that revenge game. And there's a reason why he finishes the number 1 overall quarterback in week 7 of the fantasy football season in a 4-point per passing touchdown format, on top of the fact that they were losing at the end of the first quarter. So if in fact Matthew Stafford had taken a large lead in the first quarter, for example, they were up 21-0, something of that extent, and they were able to sustain a lead of like 35-0 at halftime or 35-7, something like that, Matthew Stafford wouldn't have to do anything in the second half. He would literally just disappear. And that is beginning to be my concern for some of the games that the Rams are going to face in the next couple weeks. They look like they're one-sided matchups. And I know it's the NFL and they play for a reason and it's any given Sunday, but playing against the Houston Texans may be a matchup in which this is a complete blowout. It may be a shutout similar to the way that the Bills handled the Houston Texans, in week 3, week 4. I think Matthew Stafford is in line for probably getting himself 3 passing touchdowns passively. And if he's not able to do so, at least 2. And with that, there's so much consistency there that I'm firing him up and I'm throwing him out there because he always will have potential upside there if Darrell Henderson doesn't find the end zone on the ground, and they're going to end up doing a little bit of play action work and getting Higbee another touchdown. Maybe Woods can get a little bit of love now that Van Jefferson got his last week. Either way, Stafford's a fantastic play. Fire him up. Dak Prescott's our number 6. The incredible stat that I wanted to mention was that, outside of only week 2's contest against the Los Angeles Chargers, Dak Prescott has had 3+ touchdowns in every other game this season. He's coming off of a bye week, takes on the Minnesota Vikings, though the Minnesota Vikings are giving up the 6th fewest points to opposing quarterbacks thus far this season. We saw Dak Prescott have 445 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns against Bill Belichick's defense. This team can light it up. And when I look at both these teams and I think of, their defenses, they give up yardage, they'll certainly give up points, and this is most likely going to be a shootout between 2 high-powered offenses in the NFC. And I think very easily we could see Dak Prescott have another one of these over-the-top offensive games in which he's just lighting up a respective defense. I think that'll be the case this week against Minnesota. That's why I'm so excited about Dak. If he continues pace, he could potentially put up another 3-touchdown game. It's just a matter of whether the yardage is going to be there, because we have seen him this season go for 445, but we've also seen him settle and be a 180 passing yard quarterback, in which his upside doesn't climb as much. Okay, we're going to move on to our number 7, Tom Brady. Tom Brady, again, 21 touchdowns, leads the league in terms of total passing touchdowns this season, coming off of a week in which he only had 211 passing yards, but 4 passing touchdowns against that Chicago Bears defense. 24.44 fantasy points. Taking on the New Orleans Saints, that are currently giving up some of the fewest points to opposing quarterbacks. We just saw Geno Smith. I understand. When I look at some of the quarterbacks that, of course, New Orleans has played as of late, they haven't played against the greatest quarterbacks. Sam Darnold, Mac Jones, Daniel Jones. We have Taylor Heineke, Geno Smith. That's a relatively easy schedule. But have they played against the stud quarterback outside of Aaron Rodgers in week 1, which that was a complete failure to even get off of the runway? They didn't even get off the bus for that game. In my opinion, Tom Brady's going to score. He gets Gronk back this week. You don't even need AB. You're going to score in this matchup, and I think there is a lot of potential for Tom Brady to have himself a very easily balanced game. They're going to continue to get Fournette involved, and though this is a tougher run-stopping defense, it hasn't forced this team to shy away from it. Even going back to last season, they want to continue to pound the rock, and they're going to go ahead and do so. Either way, Tom Brady's in a very advantageous position, mainly because he is just a stable quarterback. And he has so much upside. That 4 touchdown number is something that he could maybe reach every single week. Really, he really could at this point. Maybe even 5 in some circumstances. But for now, Tom Brady, solid play as our number 7. Number 8 is Justin Herbert, coming off the bye week. The last time we saw Justin Herbert, 22 for 39 passing, 195 yards, and only 11 fantasy points. It's funny. Justin Herbert can have a week like that, and no one says anything. I know he went off to the bye week, but no one said anything. Patrick Mahomes could have one bad week in which he scores less than 10 points and everyone's losing their mind. I understand. There's some concern because it's Patrick Mahomes, but I think Justin Herbert's getting to that level. And this upcoming week, they take on the New England Patriots. The last time Justin Herbert, which was in 2020, took on Bill Belichick in that defense, they lost 45-0. Bill Belichick may have the number of Anthony Lynn, the former head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, but this is a completely different scheme, and this is a completely different offense from tippy top to the bottom. Everyone has improved as a whole, whether it's offensive line, receiving core, and of course the quarterback. Going into this upcoming week, I think about this matchup, and I think to myself, well, there have been multiple quarterbacks this season alone that have put together great performances against this defense. Jameis Winston, Davis Mills, Dak Prescott, Tua even had 2 touchdowns. Every single one of those quarterbacks I just mentioned had 2 or more touchdowns against this defense this season. Tom Brady, of all of them, ended up scoring 0. But again, this defense sometimes steps up to the plate against some and falls back against others. Nonetheless, I think Justin Herbert gets back on track. Mike Williams is healthy and practicing this week. It's far too powerful of an offense in terms of the weapons that they have with Williams, Allen, Eckler, Jared Cook, even Darnell Parham getting involved relatively quickly here in the last couple weeks. I think Justin Herbert's in a very solid position as our number 8. Moving on to the second half of the quarterback position, we begin with Joe Burrow. Thus far this season, he has thrown 2 or more touchdowns in every single game, and that kind of consistency, of course, leads you to being a number 9 overall quarterback, taking on the New York Jets defense. The only thing that concerns me is mainly the New York Jets matchup. Last week, the New England Patriots, they scored 7 total touchdowns offensively against the New York Jets defense. Sure, there's a possibility that Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals could do so. Are they going to drop a 54 bomb on this defense? Probably not, but if in fact they maintain an early enough lead to where they just have to run the ball with Samaje Perine in the second half, Chris Evans in the second half, then Joe Burrow could have a little bit of a less of an impact in this game in comparison to what he had against Baltimore, in which he had 416 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. I'm hoping that's not going to be the case. I'm hoping that we could see Joe Burrow as a top 5 quarterback because he lights this defense up for 4 straight quarters. But that's going to, of course, require the New York Jets to compete and at least score in return. With a backup quarterback this week, it's most likely not going to happen. And that is why I have Joe Burrow here. Though he is a automatic stud and an automatic play, the upside is in his eye. Moving on to Kirk Cousins coming off of the bye week, playing against Dallas. I've talked about this. This should be a higher scoring game. And the last time we saw Kirk Cousins prior to his bye took on the Carolina Panthers, put up 373 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. Again, 2 quarterbacks that are gunslingers, that are going to let it rip against defenses that are giving up yards in bunches. I think, of course, with Dalvin Cook in this backfield, it does potentially take away some value from Kirk Cousins if it becomes a Dalvin Cook-esque game. But Dallas has been relatively good in terms of stopping opposing running backs. But you never know. Any given week, and Dalvin Cook of all running backs could probably end up putting up a pretty number. Nonetheless, I think Kirk Cousins, with the weapons that he has surrounding him and the offensive scheme in the way that this game should probably be a higher scoring bout between both these lineups, leads me to believe Kirk Cousins is a top 10 quarterback this week. Ryan Tannehill sits at number 11. The reason why I have him at 11 because thus far this season he's been extremely underwhelming. Sure, he in fact even has less fantasy points than Taylor Heineke in terms of a 4-point per passing touchdown format, which is, I mean, when I saw that I was beside myself. I was just confused. Nonetheless, when I think about Ryan Tannehill, earlier this season, he's already taken on the Indianapolis Colts defense, and he found a lot of success. In fact, the best game of his season was against Indianapolis earlier this year, in which he put up 21.48 fantasy points. Going into this upcoming week's matchup, I think to myself, well, Indianapolis is giving up the 13th most points to opposing quarterbacks. And I think to myself, Russell Wilson scored 4 touchdowns against them. Stafford, 2 touchdowns. Ryan Tannehill, when he played against them, scored 3 through the air. Jacoby Brissett, 2 touchdowns. Lamar Jackson, 4 touchdowns. And the only other quarterbacks that really haven't done anything against Indianapolis, Jimmy Garoppolo and Davis Mills, who are both backups in the National Football League. So when I think of it as a whole, Ryan Tannehill with A.J. Brown, regardless of whether or not Julio Jones is ready to go, should be a fantastic play this week as our number 11. Number 12 is Aaron Rodgers. I just want to go ahead and preface, because if you're watching this before the Thursday night game, you are in no pressure to play Aaron Rodgers. There are going to be 4 other options that I mentioned after Aaron Rodgers that could be just as good of plays this week and have probably less volatility. But it is Aaron Rodgers, and I got to put some respect on the name. Though it is the second most difficult matchup going into the week in terms of points given up to opposing quarterbacks this season, Arizona's played very well. But there are some things that we have to take into account. Devontae Adams is out. Alan Lazard is out. Marquez Valdes-Scantling wasn't activated off the injured reserve. J.J. Watt is out. David Bakhtiari is back. With this all said, I give Aaron Rodgers the benefit of the doubt. I know he is a stud quarterback, and I know he's a guy that is fantastic, and he's coming off of 6 consecutive weeks of 2+ touchdowns. And I think to myself, well, Aaron Rodgers, if anybody's going to be able to do this, in which on a Thursday night on a short week with not as many options, be able to compete against Arizona, it's him. So that's why I have him at number 12, because I don't expect him to have that explosion game, but I expect Aaron Rodgers to be Aaron Rodgers. Moving on to our number 13, Carson Wentz. I've been mentioning it as of late. He has found his stride. 4 consecutive games of 2 or more touchdowns. In his last week, had himself 150 passing yards in a rain game with 2 touchdowns, 23 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown, all for 20.3 fantasy points. Had himself a fumble that was just not pretty, but that's Carson Wentz. We're going to have to live and die by that. Nonetheless, this offense has found their stride. They've gotten their offensive line fully healthy and ready to go. Carson Wentz doesn't have 2 sprained ankles anymore. And the last time he had 2 sprained ankles and played, it was against the Tennessee Titans. And he didn't have a great overall performance. And perhaps without that context, you think to yourself, well, I don't want to play him against Tennessee. But you should be playing him against Tennessee, who's giving up the 6th most points to opposing quarterbacks, despite even Patrick Mahomes only putting up 7.74 last week against that defense. I think this is a fantastic matchup and one that we have to play. Regardless of whether or not T.Y. Hilton's out there, I'm good with Pittman, I'm good with Mo Alley Cox, and of course, the backfield ran by Jonathan Taylor, continuing to find success. Moving on to the next quarterback on hand, we have Daniel Jones. I mean, Daniel Jones is he's a very interesting prospect, and the reason why I want to put it in that regard is because if in fact he does have his full capacity of players surrounding him, I mean, Sterling Shepard, Kadarius Toney, Golladay, and even Saquon Barkley, this could be a game in which Daniel Jones is a top 12 quarterback. But if he has a little bit of a limited overall core, maybe they have Shepard back and Golladay back and Booker in the backfield, Toney and Saquon are out, then I think this is where I leave him. I leave him at a number 14 because he has the ability to run the ball. He has the ability to make plays with his arm against the defense that in 5 out of the last 6 weeks have given up 2 or more touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks. This Chiefs defense just really hasn't been able to hang with any offenses, and though they haven't had the likes of Frank Clark coming off the edge or Chris Jones on the interior defensive line being able to send some pass rush in the direction of an opposing quarterback, they haven't been fully healthy. But really, with those guys back, it's going to be tough to fix that secondary. And though the offensive line for, of course, the New York Giants has been in shambles this season, there could be some potential of a pass rush that does kind of disrupt the entire, flow of this New York Giants offense. And maybe it does get Kansas City's defense in a decent position. I don't see that being the case. Either way, Daniel Jones, a pretty decent option here as our number 14. Teddy Bridgewater sits as our number 15, taking on the easiest matchup at the quarterback position, taking on the Washington football team. Last week on Thursday Night Football, on a short week, we saw it from the get-go. Teddy Bridgewater was limping out to the field on the first drive. He wasn't healthy. Hopefully, with 10 days of rest, he'll be good to go. In the first half of that game against the Cleveland Browns secondary, which again is not a great secondary at all, he only had 58 passing yards. Let that kind of sink in and just give you a little bit of context. They didn't score a single point in the first half. They didn't get many first downs. And as a whole, I think about it, and there's probably a pretty good game to come of this matchup for Teddy Bridgewater. In the last 5 games, the Washington football team have given up 2 or more touchdowns to every opposing quarterback. On top of that, Jerry Jeudy returns. And with that kind of potential in such a great matchup and a hopefully healthy Teddy Bridgewater, we should see a great week here. Moving on to Matt Ryan as our final quarterback. When I think of all the rest of the quarterbacks out there, Jameis Winston, Tua, Matt Ryan, I think to myself, well, Matt Ryan hasn't played well in his career as of late against Carolina, but I just have to give him, I just got to put him in here because he has played well as of late. And the offense really does look like they've improved mightily. And when you're playing against a defense like the Carolina Panthers, yes, they have played well this season, but as a whole, as of late, really hasn't convinced me to think that Matt Ryan won't find some sort of success or some tangent of opportunity where he may be able to strike and find a touchdown or 2 here in this game. In my opinion, Matt Ryan's a pretty safe, standard, middle-of-the-pack quarterback. Not too much upside, but at least we'll get the job done. All right, now that we've covered our quarterback rankings for Week 8, I want to go ahead and hop into Underdog Fantasy and give you guys a little bit of perspective just how the Thursday night contests work. So we're here on UnderdogFantasy.com, and tonight we have the Thursday night rumble between the Arizona Cardinals and, of course, the Green Bay Packers. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to enter into this contest. If, in fact, with a $10 entry, you're able to draft one team against 2 other players and score more points than the majority of the field, again, there's already 3,500 entrants, you're able to win a huge load of prizes with a $10 entry. All you really need to do in order to get back your money is be within, based on the entries already, in somewhere above the 50% range. You just got to be better than little like 55, 60% of people. And to be honest, I think I'm capable of doing so. So I'm going to go ahead, hop in here. Let's go ahead and put our skills to the test. All right, so we have the 3rd overall pick, which is relatively unfortunate because, again, I wanted to try to get Aaron Jones, but maybe Aaron Jones falls to me. But again, the whole point of this is it's not just one entry. I can make multiple entries on this, and I've seen people put in like 10 entries and get like 5 of them in the top 5. And some people are crazy. It's a matter of putting together the best roster. And when I look at what the potential is this season, or specifically for these offenses tonight, I think to myself, well, it's probably going to have to be guys that are relatively low key, guys that may be able to score touchdowns and get themselves ahead of others based on those touchdowns. And you need to have at least one player in each team. You can't just have all Cardinals, and you can't just have all Packers, which kind of leads me in the direction of probably trying to go with, assuming, of course, Aaron Jones and DeAndre Hopkins are gone in the first 2 picks. Aaron Jones has already been taken off the board, as you can see at the top left. I'm assuming DeAndre Hopkins goes here, which will leave me in the direction of course, deciding where do I want to go. And I look at this and I think to myself, all right, this looks like a game where James Conner finds the end zone. And if he can, I'm good getting my first pick in a double-digit point range. And then I think to myself, who's the next best option in this entire game? Is it one of these potential, overall Cardinals, or is it maybe going for Robert Tonyan and just kind of putting the risk it to, for the biscuit kind of idea? And we'll talk about Tonyan a little bit later on in this video in terms of where I have him ranked. But I want touchdowns. I want guys that can separate themselves, and I also want a lineup that may not have as much exposure. I want players that maybe like Mercedes Lewis that may not be, drafted by every single team and can give me a little bit of separation in that regard. So now that I've taken a Packers player, I may not dabble back into that, or I might not have an opportunity to go after Randall Cobb. I would consider it, but I think I've left myself in a position where I can at least get, hopefully, an AJ Green or a Christian Kirk or even a Chase Edmonds on the return here. And if that's going to be the case, which it seems like it's going to be, I think I'm in a very advantageous position because I at least have 2 Cardinals that have touchdown upside, and I have the guy that on, the Green Bay Packers outside of Aaron Jones, who should be in a very, oh my God, if they can give me Christian Kirk and AJ Green, it's not going to happen, but, fingers crossed it would. We're just going to hold our breath here. If I can have those 2 guys, holy moly, I think I'd be in a good spot for tonight. Even without, the best player in the overall game oh my God, I'm having the opportunity to take Christian Kirk and AJ Green. Oh man, this went perfectly. I got 3 guys on the Cardinals that I have a lot of, trust in. I mean, my roster is perfect. And like I said, you need to have at least one Packer. And I was able to get one early, and my favorite one on tonight's matchup, in order to solidify myself a perfect roster from the number 3 draft spot. If you guys want to check something like this out, again, travel to underdogfantasy.com. The draft has just been completed. And of course, use promo code Andrew. With your first deposit, Underdog's willing to match up to $100. So if you put in $100, they'll give you $100 in the game. Start off with $200, make a couple lineups tonight, maybe win big, and then go ahead and bask in the glory of being a fantasy champion. For those of you interested, check that out. It's quick and easy and fun to do. I'm going to go ahead and move back to the tight end position right now. Now that we've gone ahead and covered that, we can go ahead and move on to the tight end position, beginning with matchups. Okay, so as you can see, the second ranking of information here, 2021 tight end fantasy points allowed, gives us some perspective as to how many points defenses are giving up to opposing tight ends thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. That being the Baltimore Ravens, Houston Texans, Jacksonville Jaguars, Los Angeles Chargers, and Kansas City Chiefs giving up the most points per week on average to opposing tight ends. While on the other side of the spectrum, we have the Arizona Cardinals, Chicago Bears, New England Patriots, Denver Broncos, and New Orleans Saints giving up the fewest points. I mean, the fact that the Cardinals are only giving up 3.87 fantasy points, and Aaron Rodgers is most likely going to call upon Robert Tonyan to make a lot of plays tonight. It does put me in a very interesting position in terms of rankings. But nonetheless, I wanted to go ahead, show you guys this information. We'll give you more context as I go throughout the video and I talk about these matchups and how many points other respective offenses have scored against this defense. I just wanted to go ahead and present this, give you some context. So let's go ahead and move on and begin with our number 1 at the tight end position. It is Travis Kelce taking on the New York Giants, giving up the 15th most points to opposing tight ends. And though that's not the greatest overall matchup, I mean, we're talking about Travis Kelce, someone that's coming off of a week of 12 targets, 7 receptions, 65 yards, 10 fantasy points, which honestly is below par for Travis Kelce. We're anticipating 15, 16, sometimes even 20 plus fantasy points in a given week. And hopefully this is going to be the case, because even though in the last couple weeks they haven't given up that many points to opposing tight ends, they've given up a lot of points early in the season, which makes me believe the ugliness of New York Giants safeties and or coverage from their linebackers is going to rear its head out this upcoming week and give Travis Kelce a potential boost of upside. Let's talk about it. Denver in week 1, 10 catches, 85 yards and a touchdown from their tight ends. Week 2, Washington, 6 catches, 64 and a touchdown. Atlanta the next week, 5 catches, 42 and a touchdown. New Orleans the next week after that, 3 catches, 23 and a touchdown. Schultz, 6 catches for 79 yards. Tyler Higbee this last week, 5 catches, 36, could have scored a touchdown in that game. Nonetheless, I look at this and I think to myself, well, Travis Kelce's in a very advantageous position. And with Patrick Mahomes trying to get back on track, Travis Kelce is certainly going to help him do it. Kyle Pitts is our number 2. I wanted to go ahead and look at the last 2 performances of Kyle Pitts and kind of compare him to a lot of other tight ends. I mean, the record was that in the last 2 weeks, the 163 yards that he had against the Miami Dolphins and the 119 yards that he had against the New York Jets were a combined 2 weeks more than any, rookie tight end has ever put up in NFL history. And then I thought to myself, let me go ahead and compare this against the, other tight ends as of late and this season and maybe in seasons past. And I went and I looked at the top 3 tight ends as of, maybe even the top 4 in the last couple of seasons. I looked at Ertz, I looked at Kittle, I looked at Waller, and only Travis Kelce in 2018 was ever able to put up more receiving yards in a consecutive 2-game streak. That was the only other tight end, and it was back in 2018. Kyle Pitts is extremely special, and especially considering you have Arthur Smith there in an offense that wants to utilize the tight end position as much as they do. I mean, the amount of speed, the ability to release and find separation against cornerbacks in the National Football League, Kyle Pitts is just a special tight end. Not to mention, in the last 2 games that he's played, he has not seen a single red zone target. Just putting that in perspective. There is so much value to be had from Kyle Pitts. It's not only just him that's good, but the matchup's decent. I mean, I'm looking at the last couple weeks. Carolina against Dallas, 7 catches, 76 yards, 2 touchdowns between Jarwin and Schultz. Minnesota, 4 catches, 73 and a touchdown. The New York Giants this last week, just to put it in perspective, the Giants had 8 catches, 52 yards between, of course, Evan Engram and Kyle Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph had a touchdown called back. So a lot of production has gone in this direction. Kyle Pitts, Very advantageous matchup here. Moving on to TJ Hockenson as our number 3. TJ Hockenson in the last 2 weeks has had 20 total targets. And though he almost had a receiving touchdown, except for the fact that Jalen Ramsey had to be, covering him. I told you guys last week, Jalen Ramsey was going to cover him because Jalen Ramsey's pretty comfortable, going up against tight ends. He's a bigger bodied cornerback and he wants to go ahead and play against guys that are relatively his same speed. And if he can go ahead and keep up with him, he's going to dominate because his wingspan can pretty much, sustain those kind of matchups. Nonetheless, he's a great cornerback. Covered TJ Hockenson, intercepted a ball that could have been a touchdown. TJ Hockenson has the privilege of playing against the Philadelphia Eagles defense. And the reason why I mention it as a privilege is because it's such an advantageous matchup. I mean, we thought Darren Waller was going to go off. He didn't play, but Foster Moreau came in. 6 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown. O.J. Howard the week prior on Thursday night. 6 catches, 49 yards, and a touchdown. Tommy Tremble, a guy that really just is a rookie tight end for the Carolina Panthers, really does nothing. 2 catches, 12 yards, and a touchdown. Dalton Schultz, 6 catches, 80 yards, 2 touchdowns. This should be a free matchup for TJ Hockenson. He should get back on track. He should score a touchdown and be a great fantasy asset for us this week. Mike Gesicki is our number 4, and though this is a very difficult matchup, I had to think about this for a while because, Mike Gesicki's just been far too consistent to just throw him away. He has to be played. Since week 4, he's the number 3 overall tight end in fantasy from weeks 4 through 7. Yes, it's been with 2 different quarterbacks, but I don't mind. Even with Tua, this guy is just screaming open downfield. There were multiple plays last week in which Tua is throwing incomplete passes to the opposite side of the field, while Mike Gesicki is wide open, literally wide open. Coming off a week in which he had 7 catches, 85 yards, and a receiving touchdown for 18 total points. And I think to myself, yes, Buffalo is a tough defense to play against, but it's not impossible. We saw Travis Kelce, 6 catches, 57 yards, and a touchdown. Even Logan Thomas earlier this season, 4 catches, 42, and a touchdown. The fact that there's a possibility gives me excitement for the potential of Mike Gesicki's upside this week. Dallas Goedert is our number 5. Dallas Goedert without Zach Ertz in the lineup should be far better than he was last week. 6 targets for 5 receptions, 79 yards is an absolute joke. Dallas Goedert should be the premier receiving option in this offense besides Devonta Smith because truly they don't have much talent in this offense. It could be argued that the Philadelphia Eagles have the least amount of talent in terms of receiving threats in the entire National Football League next to the Detroit Lions, the New York Jets, etc. There are a lot of teams that are in that region which, of course, they don't have talent. Similar to like maybe even the New Orleans Saints. But when I think of what Jalen Hurts needs to do to succeed, he's got to throw the ball to the tight end position. He's got to get Dallas Goedert more involved. And when I look at the tight end position as of late, specifically against the Detroit Lions, they've given up some, yardage here and there. Tyler Higbee, 5 catches, for 46 yards. Uzomah had himself 3 catches, 15 and a touchdown. Mark Andrews, 5 catches for 109. Robert Tonyan, 3 catches, 52 and a touchdown. And George Kittle, 4 catches, 78 and a touchdown. My only hope is that they get him more utilized. And I think that's going to be the case as we progress through the season. But hopefully this week in a very advantageous matchup in which Jalen Hurts should be feasting through the air. We move on to Dalton Schultz. Now, the reason why I don't have Dalton Schultz at number 5, and I have him a little bit lower at number 6, though you're probably starting him regardless, is because though he's been extremely consistent, and in the last 4 games that he's played, 6 catches, 80 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 6 catches, 58, 1 touchdown, 6 catches, 79, 5 catches, 79. Though he's been unbelievably consistent, even against Bill Belichick with that 5 and 79 game, he unfortunately has a potential of losing some of those targets because of the return of Michael Gallup. And though Cedric Wilson has been pulling targets, I am still concerned with the reality if in fact the tight end position disappears a little bit more than we are used to, and the 7-8 targets that are typically going in the direction of Dalton Schultz, if those begin to kind of, dry up, then the upside of his overall week is going to be far more touchdown dependent. And I'm hoping that's not going to be the case, but nonetheless, takes on Minnesota. Should be a higher scoring matchup between these two teams. And as long as he is getting similar targets to what he has gotten in the last 4 weeks, my goodness, Dalton Schultz is on a great spot in a pretty good position this upcoming week. Hunter Henry's our number 7. All I have to say is revenge game. Revenge game. Taking on his former team in the Los Angeles Chargers, and the fact that the Chargers are giving up the 4th most points to tight ends. They cannot stop a tight end like they cannot stop a nosebleed. They have not found any sort of semblance of success against tight ends this season. Mark Andrews, 5 catches, 68 and a touchdown. David Njoku, 7 catches, 149 and a touchdown. Of course, Darren Waller, 4 catches, 50 and a touchdown. Kelce, 7 catches for 104. Logan Thomas, 3 catches, 30 and a touchdown. They cannot stop tight ends. And I think to myself, well, Hunter Henry, seems to be the favorite target in terms of the red zone for this offense, has scored a touchdown in 4 consecutive games, is in a revenge game against his former team. Sounds like Hunter Henry is in a very good position this week and probably could have himself top 5 upside. Moving on to Tyler Higbee. Speaking of potential top 5 upside because of touchdowns, of course, that's always what is required from these tight ends. And I personally think that Tyler Higbee can get himself out of this slump that he has shown in the last couple weeks, though the slump mainly has to do with the fact that Matthew Stafford is just not putting the ball on him and leading him. If Matthew Stafford had a little bit more of a consistent accuracy when targeting Tyler Higbee, he would just be unstoppable. He really would. He would score a touchdown every single week because when they get down to the red zone, he is seeing targets. It's just not coming too much because the targets aren't really leading him into the end zone. Nonetheless, when I look at this offense, playing against the Houston Texans defense, giving up the second most points to tight ends, Ertz, in his first game as a Cardinal, scored. Mo Alley Cox scored against his defense. Hunter Henry, 75 yards and a touchdown. Dawson Knox scored 2 touchdowns. This defense is just giving up touchdowns on a consecutive weekly basis. And next in store for this is Tyler Higbee. And I'm fired up for him, and that's why he's at number 8. Number 9 is Noah Fant. Noah Fant has Jerry Jeudy coming back into the lineup. Does that affect him? Absolutely. Does that hurt his overall potential? 100%. But nonetheless, Noah Fant thus far this season has shown us that he is an every other week player. 1 week he scores, takes the next week off. 1 week he scores, takes the next week off. And you might want to wonder, Andrew, what exactly are we looking at this week? Well, we're looking at the on week. We're looking at the touchdown week, and we're playing against the Washington football team, playing, against the defense that has given up the 14th most points to opposing tight ends this season. In fact, last week, the Green Bay, Mercedes Lewis and Robert Tonyan combo had themselves 7 catches for 94 yards and a touchdown. Travis Kelce, 8 catches, 99 yards against that defense. Atlanta's, combination of Pitt and Hurts combined for 8 catches, 79 yards. And of course, Dawson Knox scored against that defense with 49 receiving yards. There is a lot of potential here in a very advantageous matchup against a secondary that not only gives up the most points to wide receivers and quarterbacks, but of course, the tight end position is quickly sneaking up into that category. And that is why, Noah Fant is not only a great play, but an awesome overall upside player for this upcoming week, hopefully on the on week. Moving on to Zach Ertz at number 10. Playing on Thursday night against Green Bay. 17th easiest matchup at the tight end position. Really isn't that easy, though they give up yards. That is a good thing. If you want yardage, you're going to find it. The touchdown is going to be ever elusive because there's so many receiving options in this offense, but nonetheless, if in fact Kyler Murray and Zach Ertz were on the same page last week, Zach Ertz scores 2 touchdowns and very easily against Houston. This upcoming week, it's a little bit more of a difficult matchup, but nonetheless, will have himself opportunity because other tight ends have found themselves success against this defense. Ricky Seals-Jones last week with over 50 yards. Cole Kmet, 49 yards. Kittle, 92 yards total. Hockenson, 66 and a touchdown. Juwan Johnson in week 1 scored 2 touchdowns against this defense. Green Bay, as a whole, defensively, will have so much on their hands trying to stop Green, Rondell Moore, Christian Kirk, and let's not forget DeAndre Hopkins and whatever that running game has to bring out there, that Zach Ertz may be rolling under the radar. I will have a Cardinals jersey with him. I just got to find a better quality image going into the future weeks. Either way, he's our number 10. CJ Uzomah is our number 11. He has scored 5 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks on 13 total receptions, taking on the 7th easiest matchup at the tight end position, the New York Jets. Kyle Pitts, in week, 5 in London, 9 catches, 119 and a touchdown. Hayden Hurst in that same game, 4 catches, 40 yards and a touchdown. This last week, Hunter Henry scored a touchdown against this defense. So they've been giving up touchdowns at tight ends. It's going to be a blowout. And to be honest, the fact that CJ Uzomah is being utilized as much as he has been in the last couple of weeks just gives me that much more confidence to roll him out there as a potential fantasy prospect to find a success at the tight end position. Moving on to Robert Tonyan. Though Robert Tonyan takes on the toughest matchup at the tight end position, only giving up 3.8 fantasy points per week to opposing tight ends, Robert Tonyan's coming off a week in which he finally woke up from his slumber. He took about 5 weeks off there, but got himself 4 catches, 63 yards, and a touchdown. He needs to do that. He needs to be a vital part of this offense. He needs to probably see himself 7 to 8 targets tonight, because without Adams, without Lazard, without MVS, and with a defense in Arizona that is relatively good in terms of stopping opposing running backs, I think Robert Tonyan is going to be a huge factor here. And similar to Aaron Rodgers, he's not a must play, but I think of all the options in that offense to be a receiving threat tonight, Robert Tonyan is probably the one that has the highest upside of a touchdown. And that's why he rolls out as our number 12. Moving on to 13, we have Rob Gronkowski. Going from one Rob to another, I talk about Gronkowski because he did practice once again today. That's 2 days in a row consecutively, and that's great. That's very promising. But the issue that I have with Rob Gronkowski is that in the 3 games that he played against the New Orleans Saints last year, very similar to the fact that, of course, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were both inconsistent in those matchups because New Orleans seems to have Tom Brady's number in Tampa Bay. In the 3 games that Gronk produced, he only had 4 catches for 27 yards. That is extremely underwhelming. But that was a different Gronk. The Gronk that we've seen this season from weeks 1 through 3 had 8, 5, and 8 total targets. With AB down with an injury and the fact that Brady has thrown 11 touchdowns from weeks 4 through 7, it kind of leads me to believe that there is a very good chance here that Rob Gronkowski comes back, finds himself the ever-elusive touchdown, and a decent week at the tight end position. Ricky Seals-Jones, very sneakily fitting in there right next to Rob Gronkowski's very long name as well. RSJ, that's what we'll refer to him as. Ricky Seals-Jones at this moment, yes, Logan Thomas is coming back from the IR, but I don't think he'll be activated this week, which gives Seals-Jones another great opportunity to find success. And though they are playing against the Denver Broncos, who have not given up a single touchdown to opposing tight ends this season, I think just in terms of yardage, Ricky Seals-Jones has just been there. 6 catches, 51 this last week. And in the last couple of weeks alone, has been in that range of getting at least over 7 to 8 fantasy points a week. A solid option at number 14 in an offense that, yes, will probably have to throw the ball for the entire game. But as long as Logan Thomas is not active this week, Ricky Seals-Jones continues to be a huge factor in this offense with touchdown upside. Moving on to Jared Cook. I've been trying to find a Jared Cook jersey in a Chargers uniform, but every single one is a very low resolution image. And to be honest, it is unfortunate, but nonetheless, we are going to deal with the practice jersey for the next couple weeks until we can find just one that is perfect. Going against the New England Patriots, it is very tough for me to suggest this because I do think that Bill Belichick against tight ends is tough. But in week 6 against the Dallas Cowboys, Schultz and Blake Jarwin combined for 6 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown. The fact that an offense, because they want to heavily utilize the tight end position, is able to find success against Bill Belichick, regardless of what Bill Belichick throws at them, leads me to believe that there is a chance that Jared Cook has himself a big week here. In 2 out of the last 3 games that he has played, he has had 7 targets and at least 1 receiving touchdown in 2 out of the last 3 games. That is promising, but of course, Donald Parham being an active member of that offense leads me to think maybe there's a potential that he doesn't end up getting that touchdown. But I think as long as this is going to be a back and forth matchup, Jared Cook has kind of caught the eye of Justin Herbert as of late. And besides Mike Williams down there, besides Austin Eckler running the ball, it's the tight end that's the next best option. And I think that's why Jared Cook sits at number 15. Moving on to our final option here. And the final tight end, and the final player we're going to talk about today. Kansas City's giving up the 5th most overall points to tight ends. And Evan Engram is a decent option. Though Evan Engram is a 5, 6, 7 point tight end this season, it also has to do with the fact that really he hasn't had that many incredible matchups. But this week takes on a defense that, my goodness, have they given up points. Week 1, the Cleveland, 7 catches, 120 to touchdowns. Andrews, 5 catches, 57. Philadelphia, between Goedert and Ertz combined for 11 catches, 116 in a touchdown. Knox, 3 catches, 117 in a touchdown. Ricky Seals-Jones, 4 catches, 58 in a touchdown. Even Pruitt last week, from Derrick Henry throwing the ball, 2 catches, 27 in a touchdown. Evan Engram, this is your week. This may be your only week this season, but I go ahead and I put the respect on your name and I put you at number 16 to hopefully grace us with a decent fantasy point performance in that Monday night matchup. I want to thank you guys for watching. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you have not yet already. We're making fantasy football content for the entirety of the season. Of course, we're going to have a live stream later today after the Thursday night football game. Do not forget to check that out. I will be here via YouTube, live streaming. Subscribe, like the video down below. And of course, if you haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy, I did draft earlier in today's video. If you want to sign up using promo code Andrew, Underdog Fantasy is willing to match up to $100 of your first deposit. That's an unbelievable offer. If those of you interested in taking advantage of that, go down to the description of the video, check out the link, use promo code Andrew. And until tomorrow, we'll be talking about fantasy football in a variety of different ways. I'll see you guys. Peace.